To enjoy this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
It was a quiet December night in the small town of Courtland, Mississippi, when first responders got a call about a car fire. But when they arrived, what they saw was something out of a nightmare. A young woman, just 19, was stumbling towards them, completely engulfed in flames. Her hair singed away, her skin blackened, and with her final breaths, she tried to tell them who did this to her. But the words she spoke remain one of the greatest mysteries in this case. This is the story of Jessica Chambers, a teenager brutally murdered by fire, a family still searching for answers, and a community haunted by the question, who set Jessica Chambers on fire? This is Forensic Tales, episode number 290, The Murder of Jessica Chambers. Jessica Chambers was just 19 when she was burned alive. Born on February 2nd, 1995 in Panola County, Mississippi, Jessica grew up in the small town of Courtland, a working-class community with a population of just 500 people. It's not the kind of town you think of when talking about a teenage girl being set on fire. If you've ever seen a picture of Jessica, the first thing you might notice about her is her big, bright blue eyes. Her Aunt Sherry described her as a blue-eyed, cotton-topped little girl. She was also known for her bright smile and outgoing personality. Friends described her as someone who lit up any room she walked into. She was a type of girl who would give you a hug even if she barely knew you. One of her close friends and neighbors even said Jessica loved everyone. She never saw a color in a person, black, white, anything else. She didn't see the color of someone's skin in order to be friends with them. Jessica had dreams of becoming a nurse one day. She loved taking care of people, and her family said she always put others before herself. Her mom says that at one point she wanted to be a teacher or even a writer, but she always found herself going back to nursing. She had an especially close bond with her mother, Lisa, and her father, Ben, even though the two were no longer together. Her family and friends called her Jess, and to them, she was more than just another teenager. She was someone who had a genuine love for life. But like many teenagers in her community, Jessica had her fair share of struggles. After her older brother died unexpectedly in a car accident just a few years before her own death, Jessica went through a dark period. She experimented with drugs and fell in with a rougher crowd trying to cope with the loss. She quit the cheerleading squad, something that she was very talented at as a flyer. She was the one that was thrown up into the air doing stunts. She was also rumored to be associated with certain gang members in town. But by late 2014, her family says she was working really hard to get her life back on track. She had started working at a local gas station convenience store and was even talking about starting school again. She really wanted to make her nursing dreams a reality. But before she could make any real significant strides towards her future, she was killed. And even though people have their suspicions about who did it, her murder remains unsolved. December 6, 2014 started like any other day. It was a Saturday morning, and she spent most of the day with her mom in Courtland. According to her mom, Jessica seemed in good spirits. She slept in until about 9 o'clock and just hung around the house texting with some friends. One of the friends she texted was a guy named Quentin Tellis, a 27-year-old acquaintance of hers, someone we're going to be talking about a lot throughout this story. Sometime that afternoon, Jessica left her mom's house driving her car, a 2005 Kia Rio. She told her mom she was going out for a bit and would be back sometime later. She stopped by the local gas station where she worked, the M&M First Stop gas station, and surveillance cameras captured her on video around 5:30 p.m. getting gas and chatting briefly with someone at the gas pump. She looked calm, like it was just any other night. After that, Jessica was seen by a few friends and acquaintances around town. Exactly where she went and what she did for the next couple of hours is still one of the mysteries of this case. But at some point that night, Jessica's car ended up on a remote back road called Heron Road, a dark, remote area surrounded by only trees and fields. And just after 8 p.m., 2 local residents called 911 to report a car fire. When firefighters got there, they expected to find an abandoned burning car. What they found instead was something that no one at the scene could ever forget. Jessica was standing next to her burning car, completely engulfed in flames. And as soon as she saw help, the firefighters, she started stumbling toward them like she was reaching out for help. She did this while being burned head to toe. Fire would consume 95% of her tiny, petite body. And despite the unimaginable pain she must have been in, she tried to tell them who did this to her. Her final words would soon become the center of the investigation and the source of endless debate about who did this. Jessica's Kia Rio was burned nearly beyond recognition. The fire was so intense, it melted part of the dashboard and the exterior. But despite the damage, forensic specialists were able to determine that gasoline had been used as an accelerant. They also found traces of it on Jessica's body as well as her clothing, something that we're going to talk about again in just a second. Whoever did this had poured gasoline all over her, inside of her car, and then lit her on fire. But the biggest question was, where exactly was she set on fire? Some evidence suggested it happened inside of the car, while other evidence pointed it to being outside of the vehicle. Either way, it was clear that Jessica tried to get away. Her injuries showed that she was alive and awake and conscious after being set on fire, and she somehow managed to open the car door and stumble down the road before collapsing. Although she initially survived, she was pronounced dead at the hospital the following morning. On top of having about 98% of her body burned, she had a flammable liquid, assumed to be gasoline, poured on her body, up her nose, down her throat. Someone had intentionally set this poor girl on fire. The name that some of the first responders said they heard Jessica say sounded like either Eric or Derek. But others said they didn't hear anything. They couldn't make out what she was saying because her mouth was basically on fire along with the rest of her body. But those words, Eric or Derek, would soon become one of the biggest pieces of evidence in this case. Jessica's car keys were later found along a road near where the fire happened. This particular location will also become a key detail to this case. The authorities also got their hands on her cell phone, and as soon as they turned it on and went through it, they started to get a better picture of her last few hours. Based on her cell phone activity, we know Jessica spent the first part of the day at her mom's house. She also hung out with 2 friends, Keisha Myers and Quentin Tellis. Now, we know Jessica and Quentin had some type of relationship with each other. They could have been just friends since they both had other girlfriends and boyfriends. They could have been more than that. But we know that just 2 days before this happened, Quentin was texting Jessica asking her to have sex with him. But every single time, she rejected him, saying things like, "Oh Lord," which, as a girl myself, was definitely Jessica saying no, she didn't want to have sex with him. So while I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows the extent of their relationship, we know at least something was going on between them. Did they both like each other, although they were both in separate relationships? Something I'll go into more detail about. Did he like her more than she liked him? Did he just want to have sex with her and that was it? I don't know. But they definitely hung out and spent some time together right before all of this happened. Quentin had even gone with Jessica to the doctor's just a few days before and went with her to pick up her medication. So after seeing Keisha and Quentin for a little bit, Jessica headed back to her mom's house to take a nap. This was sometime between 2:21 and 4:23, at which point Quentin called Jessica and woke her up at 4:23. About an hour later, Jessica told her mom she was going to go out, get something to eat, and clean out her car. Then at around 5:30 p.m., she's seen on the gas station surveillance camera getting a snack and filling up her car. This was a spot only about 1.5 miles from where her body would be found. This was also the last time she's seen alive. We know from her cell phone's location data that she went near Batesville sometime around 6, but went back to Courtland around 6:30. No one knows what she was doing in Batesville, but we do know that about 15 minutes later, she called her mom, who noticed that it was unusually quiet. Her mom didn't hear any music or anyone talking in the background, which made her think she was with someone. And as we're about to find out, she was. Jessica was once again with her male friend, Quentin. Then at 7:30, she drove to the area where she was found about a half hour later. So once they had all of her cell data, the first thing the police wanted to do was sit down and speak with this Quentin Tellis guy. What could he know about what happened? This was a male friend of the victim. They possibly had some type of romantic or sexual relationship, and the guy had a criminal record. He had prior convictions for things like burglary, drug possession, and fleeing from the police. He was 27. Jessica was only 19. Now, if all of that doesn't sound bad enough, he was also arrested in 2015 after Jessica's murder for the murder of another woman whose credit cards had been stolen and he was caught using after her murder. So, not a very good dude. But before any arrests were made, the police did their due diligence. They went through everyone else in Jessica Chambers' life, her family, her close friends, ex-boyfriends, looking to see if anyone had motive. Was there someone mad at Jessica? Did she have any enemies? Setting someone on fire is quite literally one of the worst ways to kill someone. So was there someone in her life capable of that? So nearly everyone from the area was questioned, especially anyone with the names of Eric and Derek, the names that firefighters thought they heard Jessica say. But they were eventually ruled out. No Eric or Derek's fit the bill. They also interviewed Travis, Jessica's boyfriend at the time, but he was easy to rule out because he was in jail. Now, in a completely unrelated note, Travis Sanford was found shot and killed inside of his home in March of 2019. Someone had apparently shot and killed him over a dispute about a dice game. But that has absolutely nothing to do with this case. The police also looked at convicted drug dealers who might have had a connection to her. Jessica herself had even expressed concerns involving her friends to her father, who worked as a mechanic for the county sheriff's office. The last 6 weeks before she died, she told me 10 or 15 times, "Everyone thinks I'm snitching because you work for the police," her father told People magazine. But that path didn't lead anywhere. So now they're back to Quentin. When the police finally questioned him, his story about that day changed multiple times. It was like each time they sat down and spoke with him, he had something to change or to add once he was confronted with the evidence that what he was saying was a lie. For example, he initially denied seeing her that day, but later admitted they hung out briefly. And not only did they hang out, the police would eventually learn that they smoked weed together, went to the gas station together, ate dinner at a Taco Bell. So I think it's safe to say that they did a little more than just, quote, briefly hang out. And here's some more examples of those inconsistencies. At first, he claimed to be at a store in Batesville when the fire had started, but that had to be a lie. There's surveillance footage showing him at the store at 8:26 p.m. That's a whole 15 minutes after the fire started. He could have easily started the fire, run to the store, and then try to create an alibi for himself. He also initially said that a friend came to pick him up that night, but that was also a lie. When the police questioned that particular friend, he had gone to a football game all the way in Nashville that night, and Quentin definitely wasn't with him. So it was like any question the police had about what he and Jessica did together that night, he tried to lie about it. That's just downright suspicious. But at this point, there was no forensic evidence directly linking him to the murder. No fingerprints, no DNA, and the name Jessica reportedly said didn't match his at all. Quentin sounds nothing like Eric or Derek. And looking back at Jessica's car, that didn't have any forensic evidence either. Her car was melted so badly that even specialized labs couldn't recover fingerprints or DNA from it. But there was one thing, something that will be heavily debated a little later on. 2 days after the fire, the keys to Jessica's Kia Rio were found about a quarter of a mile away. A resident had found them and turned them over to the authorities. So the theory is that whoever set the fire tried to get rid of her keys by throwing them a quarter of a mile away from the scene. So when the keys were tested, they found a mixture of DNA from 4 different people. Now, depending on what type of DNA test was used, Quentin's DNA may or may not be one of those 4 people. Based on the results of the autosomal STR test, Quentin wasn't one of them. But based on another test, the YSTR test, based on the male chromosome, Quentin's DNA could not be excluded as being one of the 4 profiles. So there was a chance his DNA was on Jessica's car keys, depending on which test was used. It's not a slam dunk by any means, but at least it's something. It potentially puts the primary suspect's DNA on the victim's car keys. But wait, there's more. There was also this. A part of what Quentin said he did that night was ask his older sister to borrow her car so that he could go see his girlfriend, who lived in Monroe, Louisiana. I know, there's a lot of different relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends in this story. But this is what I meant when I said that Quentin had a girlfriend and Jessica had a boyfriend at the time. So essentially, that was part of his alibi. He couldn't have set the fire because he was on his way to his sister's house to pick up her Tahoe. But for investigators, this made it seem even more likely that he had dumped Jessica's keys where they were found. Here's why. They say there's a cut-through trail that leads directly from where Jessica was found on Heron Road to the subdivision where his sister lived. That's the same exact spot where Jessica's car keys were found. So they think he took the car keys, dumped them while on his way to his sister's house to try to establish an alibi. It was a direct route. It was super easy. It's also strange that Quentin had only driven his sister's car, the Tahoe, once in his entire life. And the one time that he had borrowed it, he took it to go get washed. So it wasn't like this was something that he ever did. He didn't borrow his sister's car. Now, going back to Quentin's behavior, what did he do afterward? Well, the police say he deleted all of his and Jessica's communication on his cell phone, their text messages, their phone calls, voicemails. Everything was deleted and erased. And despite the two of them talking all day long in the days prior, he never once called after the fire. Even after he found out about it, before she was even pronounced dead, he never called or texted. He didn't go to the hospital. He didn't go to her mom's house to see if he could help or do anything. Instead, he deleted everything on his cell phone that ever connected him to her. Now, I know that's not cold, hard forensic evidence, but if you're Quentin, that doesn't look good. What also doesn't look good are all those text messages about him asking her for sex. We know from those deleted texts that in the week prior, he repeatedly, over and over again, asked to have sex with her. But each time, she basically denied him. And on the day of the fire, he asked for sex 4 separate times. Each time, she said no. So that's the moment the police believed they had a motive. While in Quentin's driveway, he tried to have sex with her, but she didn't want to. He got angry, suffocated her until she temporarily passed out. Then, in order to distance himself from the crime, he then drove her car to the area where it was later found. He then ran on foot back to his sister's house, took her car, picked up gasoline from his house, returned to Jessica's car, and set it on fire. To the authorities, all the evidence backed that theory up. They have the text messages showing him asking for sex. We know she spoke with her mom on the phone at 6:48, and her mom thought it was strange how quiet it was in the background, suggesting to her that her daughter was with someone, which Quentin later admitted he was. At 7:30 p.m., Jessica's cell phone pings off a cell tower near Heron Road where she'd be found. At 7:42, Quentin's phone wakes up, calls Jessica, leaving a voicemail. He then follows up that voicemail with a text message that says, quote, "Bae, my friend is coming over tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. Good night, sweet dreams," end quote. The authorities say that's him trying yet again to create an alibi. Between 7:46 and 8, his cell phone is quiet again. Then at 7:50 to 7:52, a vehicle can be seen pulling into Quentin's driveway toward a storage shed, and it remained there for about 1 minute and 42 seconds. Quentin would eventually tell FBI agents that he kept a 5-gallon gas can inside of that shed. So he went there to get the accelerant. He already strangled her. He may or may not think she's already dead at this point. So he comes up with the idea to set her on fire inside of her car to try and cover up any crime connected to him. Then at 7:52, the vehicle leaves. At 8 o'clock, A vehicle matching the description of Quinton's sister's SUV can be seen heading toward Batesville at a very high rate of speed. This is when the police say that he was speeding away from the fire. Finally, at 8:04 p.m., Jessica's cell phone made one last communication with Towers before shutting off after getting too hot from the fire. So from a forensic evidence perspective, you have DNA on Jessica's car keys that at least one DNA test says that Quinton cannot be excluded, and you have digital forensic evidence showing how the two of them moved together basically the entire night. So now it's February 2016, and a Panola County grand jury indicted Quinton for Jessica's murder. He was easy to track down because he was already in jail, so all he had to do was appear in a different courtroom. The indictment charged him with capital murder, meaning if convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for Jessica's family, the news of his indictment was great. They thought they were finally going to get justice for their daughter. But the trial didn't go as expected. It ended up being a hung jury. They couldn't reach a unanimous decision. There might have been an issue with the jury not understanding the instructions or the charges, but either way, it ended with a mistrial. Some of the jurors might have thought he was guilty, but what about Jessica saying Eric or Derek as the person who did this to her? Quinton never went by any of those names or anything like it. Quinton sounds nothing like Eric or Derek, so I think that raised some reasonable doubt in the jurors' minds. There was also the cell phone evidence. Prosecutors said that cell phone data put Jessica and Quinton together at the same location just before or possibly even during the murder. But the defense argued it wasn't accurate. Cell phone tower pings aren't always conclusive, especially in rural areas where there might only be a handful of towers. In these areas, experts for the defense said that the location of the cell phone could only be narrowed down to an area about 2 to 10 or even 20 square miles. So after the first mistrial, prosecutors immediately refiled criminal charges, and Quinton was put on trial for a second time. This time around, prosecutors focused on two things. Number one, what Jessica said as she was running toward the firefighters. So the state had a speech pathologist testify to try to cast doubt on what exactly the first responders might have thought that they heard. The expert, Dr. Carolyn Hidgen, said that Jessica's injuries, which included burns on more than 90% of her body, would have made it very, very hard for her to enunciate words at all. Her mouth and face were quite literally on fire. She had gasoline poured down her throat. So could she properly enunciate anything, let alone Eric or Derek? That might have been what it sounded like to the firefighters, but what Jessica was actually trying to say while she's covered head to toe in gasoline and fire, maybe it was something different. And it's not like this fire started right before first responders got there. The fire started about 20 minutes before. So what kind of damage could that have done to her ability to be able to speak clearly? Another important part of the state's case was Quinton's DNA on the car keys. We know there was a mixture of DNA from 4 different people on them, and according to the YSTR DNA test, Quinton couldn't be excluded. But this was something his defense really went after. The autosomal STR test, which is generally considered more accurate, showed that his DNA wasn't on the car keys at all. It was only the less precise test, the YSTR DNA test, that suggested he couldn't be excluded. Being excluded isn't the same thing as being included, at least according to his defense. But just how certain was the prosecution that his DNA couldn't be excluded? Well, according to their DNA expert, she could safely exclude 99.7% of the male population from the Keys. Quentin Tellis isn't one of them. So it was a battle of the experts. Could Jessica have been able to enunciate at all while fire covered 98% of her body? Could the less precise DNA test mean that Quentin's DNA was in fact on her car keys? And could the cell phone data be trusted, even in rural areas where there aren't many cell towers? Well, the second jury couldn't decide either. That second trial also ended in a hung jury, a second mistrial. So now prosecutors had a very tough decision to make. Would they try Quentin a third time for murder? As of today, they haven't. Now, that doesn't mean they won't try him again in the future, especially if additional evidence emerges. But as of now, that third trial hasn't happened. And the murder of Jessica Chambers is technically unsolved. Quentin, he's presumed innocent. And a decade later, theories about what really happened that night continue to divide her community. One theory is the prosecution's original case, that Quentin killed Jessica. He tried to have sex with her that night. She rejected him, and in a rage, he set her on fire. But others argue that Jessica's dying words should be taken at face value. Multiple first responders said she was trying to say Eric or Derek. They believe she was naming her attacker, and that investigators focused too much on Quentin, ignoring potential other suspects. Some locals have even speculated that Jessica might have been harmed by someone in her social circle, involving possibly drugs or gangs, and that the murder might be in retaliation for something that she knew or something that she did. Another possibility is that Jessica was targeted randomly and by someone she didn't know or barely knew. Although that theory seems a little far-fetched, and without physical or forensic evidence pointing definitively to one person, it's hard to say. But one thing is for sure, her family continues to fight for justice. They believe that someone in their small, tight-knit community knows exactly what happened to Jessica that night, but someone's too afraid to come forward. Before we get to the end of the story, there are two updates I want to share. The first is about Jessica's mom, Lisa. According to her online obituary, Lisa Chambers passed away on Friday, October 29th, 2021, at the age of just 52. She passed away not knowing who murdered her daughter. And before her death, she had always been incredibly outspoken about finding her daughter's killer. She wanted so badly to see that person held accountable. But sadly, she didn't live to see that happen. According to the obituary, she left behind 3 siblings, 2 children, and 3 grandchildren. The second update is about Quentin Tellis. We already know that prosecutors haven't decided about trying him for a third time, but when it comes to the other murder he was accused of, a recent graduate of the University of Louisiana Monroe, he pleaded guilty to using her debit card without her permission in the days after her death. But he denies killing her. In that particular case, the murder charge was dismissed in 2022 because the judge in that case felt like Quentin's rights to a fair and speedy trial had been violated. For context, this murder happened in 2015, but that ruling wasn't made until 2024. So at this point, it's unclear if he'll ever be charged again in that particular case or not. But none of this means this man is walking free today. Currently, he's serving a prison sentence in Mississippi for burglary. He's expected to be released sometime in 2027. Jessica Chambers was just 19 years old when her life was stolen from her in the most unimaginable way. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman with dreams of becoming a nurse someday. Her death wasn't just tragic, it was brutal and deeply personal. Today, nearly a decade later, her family is still waiting for answers. 2 trials ended without a conviction. Her killer remains free, and her community is left with a haunting question. Who set Jessica Chambers on fire, and why? If you have any information about Jessica's murder, no matter how small it may seem, please contact the Panola County Sheriff's Office or your local authorities. Her family deserves to know the truth. To share your thoughts on this week's episode, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to hear my personal take on the case, sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/forensictales. After each episode, I release a bonus episode where I share my personal thoughts on the case in more detail. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales so you never miss an episode. We release a new episode every Monday. If you love this show, please consider leaving us a positive review. It helps the show grow. You can also support the show through Patreon. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in next week for a new case. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to help create compelling new cases, fund research, and assist with production and editing costs, you can support the show with a small monthly contribution. In return, you'll be one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and gain access to exclusive content. To learn more, visit patreon.com/forensictales. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers: Tony A., Christine B., Sherry A., Michael D., Nicola, Megan G., Ureli, Jerry, Ann F., Carol A., Shannon D., Marianne C., Lois B., Lynn H., Ashley H., Danielle D., Chrissy D., Brett R., Luz Raquel, and Christine K. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head to our Patreon page or email me at courtney@forensictales.com. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.